The scale of justice and the bonds of compassion. The morning sun filtered through the tall windows of the courtroom, casting long and steady shadows across the polished mahogany benches. There was a particular stillness in the air, the kind that only exists in a place where the chaotic threads of human lives are untangled by the steady hand of the law. Officer Byrd stood with his customary poise, his presence a grounding force in the room. With a voice that commanded immediate attention, he announced the commencement of the session. The court came to order, and as the people rose in unison, the Honorable Judge Judy entered the room. She was a figure of sharp intellect and even sharper wit, a woman who had seen every facet of human nature and yet maintained a profound dedication to the truth. The case of the unexpected collision. Judge Judy took her seat and looked down at the documents before her. Case number 3014 featured Mrs. Bonnie Bailey as the plaintiff and Mr. Stephen Chicos as the defendant. The atmosphere was thick with the lingering scent of old paper and the nervous energy of those seeking resolution. Judge Judy began by addressing Mrs. Bailey. The judge asked the woman to confirm the details of the day her life had been disrupted. It was on April the 4th of this year. Mrs. Bailey spoke with a mix of frustration and bewilderment, explaining that her car had been totaled while it was perfectly parked. At approximately 9:40 in the morning, while most of the city was humming with the start of a workday, Mrs. Bailey had been at her orthodontist appointment to have her braces tightened. She described the scene vividly. She had found a parking meter, the first one available, and settled into the dentist's chair. As the dental professionals were taking the wires out of her mouth, a phone call came through. The voice on the other end asked what kind of car she drove. When she replied that it was an Audi, a heavy silence followed, broken only by a soft acknowledgement. Upon stepping outside, the world Mrs. Bailey knew had turned into a scene of commotion. There were several cars hit, people were in tears, and then she saw it. Her Audi, her pride and joy, was mangled. The shock was so profound that she felt as though she needed someone to catch her. The police were already on the scene, or perhaps they had just arrived, weaving through the debris to ask her questions to which she had no answers. She truly had no idea what had happened to her parked vehicle. The judge leaned forward, her eyes narrowing as she inquired about a police report. In a world of legalities, documentation was the lifeblood of a case. Mrs. Bailey explained that the officers had mentioned that any collision or hit and run required the involvement of the parties. Yet she admitted she did not have a formal report in her possession at that moment. She was suing Mr. Chicos because his car had been involved in the accident. To her, it was simple. Her car was paid off. She had chosen not to carry collision insurance to keep her costs down, and now she was left with a totaled vehicle and a pile of bills. Then the focus shifted to Mr. Stephen Chicos. He stood before the bench, ready to recount his version of the morning. He had been on his way to drop his girlfriend back at her home before heading to his own place of work. He was behind the wheel of his 2011 Mazda 3. He explained that he had been traveling in the left lane, the faster lane, for about half a mile or a quarter of a mile. As he approached the intersection of Beverly and Alvarado, he knew from experience that traffic often backed up due to drivers waiting to make a left turn. In a proactive move to avoid being stuck, he decided to merge into the right-hand lane. He checked over his right shoulder, activated his turn signal, and prepared for the transition. In his rear-view mirror, he saw a white car far back in the distance. However, there was a blue BMW behind him in the fast lane. As Mr. Chicos proceeded to merge, thinking the coast was clear, the blue BMW suddenly cut off the white car. It accelerated with reckless abandon, attempting to speed past Mr. Chicos. The BMW clipped his vehicle during the merge and then careened wildly into the parked cars on the side of the road, including the Audi belonging to Mrs. Bailey. Mr. Chicos maintained that his car never even made contact with the Audi. Judge Judy, always a seeker of visual truth, turned to the video evidence. The screen flickered to life, showing the street in grainy but undeniable detail. The courtroom watched in silence as the sequence unfolded. The judge analyzed the footage with a keen eye. She noted how Mr. Chicos had already begun his merge and was halfway into the right lane when the blue BMW surged from behind. The video revealed something even more chilling. A man was standing by a small blue Volkswagen, oblivious to the chaos hurtling toward him. As the BMW lost control, it narrowly missed a man who was in the process of opening his car door. Judge Judy remarked that by the grace of God, that man was not killed. The BMW driver had been driving with such reckless speed that he almost caused a tragedy far greater than mere property damage. The judge reached a conclusion with the speed of a thunderbolt. It was clear that the BMW was at fault. Mr. Chicos could not have avoided the mishap caused by such reckless driving. She looked at Mrs. Bailey and explained that while her situation was unfortunate, she was suing the wrong person. If she brought the BMW driver to court, the judge would be more than happy to grant a judgment. The case against Mr. Chicos was dismissed. As the parties left, Mrs. Bailey reflected on a lesson learned. She had watched Judge Judy since she was a small child and knew the decision was fair, even if it meant her journey for justice was not yet over. She resolved to pursue the BMW driver and their insurance company with renewed vigor, the bonds of grandchildren, and the spaghetti dinner. The court then turned its attention to case number 3013, a matter of family grief and the complicated nature of charity. Mrs. Cheryl Tull was suing her former daughter-in-law, Ariel Messenger, for benefit money that had been raised for her 3 grandchildren. The history between the two women was long and tangled. Though Cheryl referred to Ariel as her ex-daughter-in-law, the younger woman had never actually been married to Cheryl's son, though they had been together for many years before separating 5 or 6 years ago. The core of the tragedy, however, was much more recent. In December of the previous year, Cheryl's daughter had been killed in a tragic automobile accident. She left behind 3 children who were now in the care of their grandmother, Cheryl. Touched by the tragedy, Ariel Messenger decided to organize a fundraiser to help the children. She arranged a spaghetti dinner at the bar where she worked. Her boss had kindly donated the space for the event. Ariel described the dinner as a community effort. People paid $15 for a meal, which included a to-go box. There were bake sales, raffles, and a spirit of togetherness. People donated the food, and every dollar raised above the cost was intended for the children. The dispute arose over the sum of $1,800 that had been collected. Mrs. Tull, burdened by the sudden responsibility of 3 young children and the expenses of clearing out her late daughter's apartment and moving belongings into storage, felt that the money should be turned over to her immediately to cover these costs. Ariel, on the other hand, held a different view. She wanted to ensure that the money was preserved specifically for the children's future. She intended to open bank accounts for each of them, but she was waiting for their Social Security numbers to do so properly. She wanted the funds to be a nest egg, something that would grow over time and be available to them when they reached adulthood. The tension between the two women was palpable. Mrs. Tull felt slighted because she had not been included in the planning of the fundraiser until the day before it happened. She argued that the flyer for the event stated the money was to help lay her daughter to rest and support the children. She had already opened accounts for the kids at her own credit union, though they were technically in her name because the children were minors. Judge Judy listened patiently, but her role was to apply the law and common sense. She explained to Mrs. Tull that when someone runs a benefit, they have the right to determine how those funds are managed for the intended beneficiaries. If Ariel wanted to be the steward of that money for the grandchildren, she had every right to be. The judge pointed out that the expenses Mrs. Tull was facing, while real and stressful, were not necessarily what the community members had in mind when they donated to the Children's Fund. She also touched upon the fact that as the children of a working mother who had passed away, they were likely entitled to Social Security benefits, which would provide more consistent support once the custody matters were fully resolved in court. To bridge the gap between the two women and ensure the money was protected, Judge Judy proposed a solution. Since Mrs. Tull was hesitant to provide the children's Social Security numbers to Ariel due to a lack of trust, the judge ordered that the funds be used to purchase United States savings bonds in the children's names. These bonds would serve as a long-term investment. They would accrue interest and mature over time, perhaps growing from $600 each to $800 or more by the time the children were ready for college or their first apartments. The court clerk would hold the documentation until proof of the purchase was provided. This ensured that the money remained untouched by any adults and would be a direct gift from the community to the children when they reached the age of 18 or 21. Mrs. Tull, though initially resistant, eventually accepted the wisdom of the arrangement. She realized that the children would have their bonds, and their future would be a little bit brighter. Ariel, too, felt a sense of relief that her efforts to help the children would be realized in a secure and lasting way. The judge concluded the session with a reminder of the importance of such acts of kindness. It was a beautiful thing for a community to come together in the wake of a tragedy. The timing of the event, held only days after the accident, was a testament to the adrenaline of compassion. As the courtroom cleared, the echoes of the day's lessons lingered. Justice had been served not just through the interpretation of laws, but through the encouragement of responsibility and protection of the vulnerable. The participants walked out into the afternoon air, each carrying a clearer understanding of their duties to one another and the paths that lay ahead.